Welcome to How to Be a Humane Leader Without Losing Your Job. We're here to chat about humane leadership in a way that's real and relatable, tackling work-life challenges and offering practical advice to navigate tough decisions. Whether you're leading a team or navigating your own career, we've got you covered. I'm Chris Hollerking, a Fortune 100 IT leader, and with me is Roberto Torres, a startup engineering leader. We'll dive into the real-world stuff, share experiences, and offer guidance on leading with compassion while keeping your career on track. Today, we'll discuss how a humane leader reduces the workload when there's just too much going on. Boy, that's probably an everyday occurrence for your job, isn't it, Roberto? Big companies always got way too much going on.
Yeah, indeed. There are a lot of meetings, a lot of work. And you mentioned I have to do all this in this little specific of time of the day. Yeah, man. And you know that also too.
Yes, it can be overwhelming. I always look to see if there was some seasonality to it, like would it slow down at Christmas or speed up at Christmas, or does it slow down after the new year? And to me, it was pretty much chaos all the time. It was just trying to manage chaos for the team in a humane way year round. I don't know. I think that there were always way too many things to do, way too few resources to do it, and was a stress not only for myself, it was a stress for my leaders above me, and it certainly was stressful for the teams that I led.
Yeah, no, there is a persistent chaos, excuse me, because I think in big companies the thing is we lose track of the small stuff, and we are only thinking big. And that doesn't mean that it's bad. It is actually good, but it has to be in order and in control. And the problem is there is too much to be done because we have too big objectives to accomplish. So I think yeah.
Yeah, and I remember distinctly earliest this is one of my early leadership or management roles. I took a fairly simplistic view, which worked out pretty well. So at the time, I was a senior manager reporting to a director. He had, I don't know, I want to say maybe 5 or 6 direct reports, each one of us leading teams of various sizes, anywhere from small teams that were maybe 5 people to larger teams that were 30 people or more. And what I argued with them in our staff meetings that things were getting out of control. We were deploying too many things at once. We were doing software applications, network changes, all kinds of things all at once. And what I said is we really need to boil this staff meeting down to what are our group's top 5 priorities, and what did we move forward on those top 5 priorities this week, and what are we finishing by the end of the month? Because we were a culture that did monthly reports. I don't know how much that kind of stuff still exists. I guess with Elon Musk and his Doge, they started making people do weekly monthly reports with what did you finish this week. We never got to that level of granularity, but we were very monthly report um, focused, right? And really, you wanted to emphasize in those reports not that you made some progress. You wanted to report we finished something, right? And so with our top 5, we tried to focus on what was something that you could finish in 4 weeks. Now, obviously, projects could take months, maybe even years. But if you could break it down so that you could report on accomplishments that were completed within 4 weeks, it really started to help the team focus on what were the most important things in the short term. What were the most important things for the day, the week, the month, because that's what was going to move the whole project plan forward most effectively. Because if you had the top 50 things you were trying to do for the month, nothing got finished ever.
Mm.
You were just constantly task switching. And so for us, the top 5 for the size group we were, at the director level, him having his top 5, us then making sure that our groups were aligned to move those top 5 forward as the highest priorities really made a big difference for us in workload.
One thing that I must add is constant changes make this impossible to do. You know, you're working in an initiative, you're working on something, and suddenly there is a new idea, there is a new problem, there is something, and you add that to it is like a layer, you know, like an onion layer. And suddenly you have too many onion layers in which you don't know which one to do and which one you shouldn't do because some of them are dependent or are related to other tasks. So it's impossible to do it. I think this is a huge burden for many people, regardless of the seniority they have, regardless of their leadership style they possess. And I think when we understand how the culture and the politics within the company is running, maybe we could either decide what to do, what to attack, or have our manager decide what to do. And I think with that in mind, YouTube maybe focus on the stuff. Since we are tech guys, when we usually are working on something and someone comes and say, okay, you're going to switch this from and do this and do other stuff, it is called tech debt or technical debt. It is because you prioritize present versus future. So maybe that task that you've been working, let's say for a week, you send it to another bucket, but it still remains there. And that technical debt often hurts a company.
Agreed. Because what you've done is now you have more things to support with the same number of people,
Yeah.
right? You know, and so you just keep making the pie bigger and bigger in terms of workload, but you have the same number of people in general. You will have the same number of humans to work on things. So, you know, I think that kind of circles back to these prioritization of things. Prioritization of the workload is the best way for the humane leader to help their team struggling when this kind of change in priorities is constant. It sometimes it can be as simple as, you know, if you're physically located together, is you have the whiteboard on what needs to be done by Friday, what needs to be done by the end of the month, and it's written up on the board clearly where everyone can see it, and you know they can constantly ask themselves, am I working towards one of those top 5, you know, items? If the answer is no, why not? You know, is it because, well, I'm waiting for Roberto to finish something and he's going to finish it by Wednesday, so then Thursday and Friday I'm focused on that. Okay, then you work on some of the other filler tasks that might be lower priority than that top 5. But you know, if the priorities are constantly changing and you've got this technical debt burden, it only ends in catastrophe. It's just a matter of when, right? Because eventually the old thing breaks and now you got to spend a lot of resources on fixing it. So this kind of prioritization keeps the team focused and hopefully not stressing that the list of things to do is 1,000 items long. But you can't focus and move 1,000 things forward at once. And that's kind of what, you know, where we focused on that top 5 was if you give people a narrow enough view of what to work on, eventually the view gets bigger and bigger and you paint the whole picture and the whole picture gets done. But if you tell people we're going to paint this whole suite of enterprise applications, that whole big picture in general for most people is overwhelming and they can't get started on the first task. You know,
Yeah.
So I really think prioritizing and helping the team stay focused on what do you need to finish by Friday? Make sure that gets done. Once you're done on that, we can work on some of these other things, or, you know, again, if you're waiting on somebody else, I recognize from project management, you cannot go to a resource and say, you have one priority. This is the one thing you're going to work on. I don't know any company that can successfully do that, right? Because sooner or later you're waiting on a dependency of something else. So then they're sitting at their desk not doing anything, right? So the task bucket has to be full enough so that when you're waiting for something else, you can switch tasks. But if you're switching between more than 5 tasks, you're losing productivity because it takes you so long to dig into that new task and come back up to speed and think about it. And okay, now it took me 20 minutes to get back up to speed. Now I'm going to work on that. And now in 20 minutes, you're switching my priority again. Half the day is going to be gone restarting the task every time, right? And so, in project management, when you can, to have people focused on the very top priorities makes them more productive, and more productive means they will be under less stress. It will work. You just have that part you got to take on faith. The size of the bucket of work still stays the same, but you don't let them work on all 1,000 tasks at once, because nothing will get done. They won't feel good, because by the end of Friday, they didn't finish anything that they could report, right? Anything that they could come to you and say, Roberto, I finished digging the hole. The hole is now 5 feet deep.
Yeah, yeah. And one thing also is, right now you talk about priorities toolman. I totally agree with that. But you mentioned a word, as a very specific word. It is overwhelming to the team members. So we had to have open communication with them, active listening, because there are some which will say, okay, I can manage this kind of changes, all this amount of changes, but there will be other ones who wouldn't, who would not. And we had to be talking with them about how they feel and what we are achieving. And it's important for them to understand that changes are on a daily basis, either at work or our personal life. And as we know, life is ambiguous. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And we had to adjust. So those team members, we had to work a little bit more with them. Let the frustration run out and guide them to not only understand everything about changes and all these overwhelming effect that they're having, or most important, to train them or to have a culture within them of all the changes that they might have in the future, and how to lower down that frustration, how to be more resilient, how to express more and to receive. And with that in mind, it's like planting a seed, of people or person who is going to convert into a tree, a huge tree, which changes won't affect them as much as possible. No?
Absolutely right. You're pointing out that the individuals are unique.
Yeah.
Right? Some people may really only be able to manage 3 top priorities. Other people might handle 10 fine. I guess I'd say my top 5 is a rule of thumb, and you do treat everyone a little bit different. You may expose some of the other leaders to a slightly longer list so they're aware, right? And let them manage their time. If they can figure out, if they can juggle 10 tasks, that's great. But at the end of the month, right, when we're back to that milestone or project management style of leadership, really in the company's culture that we were in, it was all about results. It didn't matter the path that you took to get there. Is it a 10-mile path or a 5-mile path? Did it take 50 horsepower or 10 horsepower? That wasn't the point. The point was, is it completed with the quality, and is it doing what it was supposed to do? And if you got it completed, you were the winner, right? You were the successful employee. And I think sometimes that's what teams, when they're overburdened, they lose sight of. Did you actually accomplish, and does it do what it it needs. And that time slicing between 100 tasks, you may have gotten some of them done, but you lose sight of it and you can't even communicate to your leadership, we successfully finished part of the overall puzzle of this project. And that can help in your communication to the team too, is do they understand how what they're working on, this piece of the puzzle you finished, that's an accomplishment, it's done. Sometimes when you're overwhelming them and you're moving 1,000 puzzle pieces forward all at once to try and finish the puzzle in just one fell swoop, all at the same deadline, it's impossible. You don't get anywhere, right? You could never build a puzzle by just pushing all 1,000 pieces at once and get it to form a picture. That's how projects are. Now, sometimes you've got to move different pieces a little bit, but you've got to let the team have a sense of accomplishment, because that's where their frustration level usually comes from, is that you're task switching too often, they never finish any of them, or they can't identify that they actually did finish something. They may have, but because you've painted the picture so big, they don't see that their piece of the puzzle is now in the proper place. So again, it's that communication with the team. Do they understand the top priorities? Do they understand that they actually finished something that's really monumental to the project? That's going to give them that sense of accomplishment, right? Getting halfway up the mountain is nice, get a nice view, but it's not the sense of accomplishment of actually finishing the task. And so sometimes you got to break the tasks down enough so that they have that kind of monthly success, and maybe in some cultures, weekly success. It really that's something you have to decide as the humane leader, what's best for your company culture and or country culture also, right? Because that's going to have an impact if you have a team that's people from many different countries.
Yeah, and one thing is, using that mountain analogy, let me tell you that when you climb a mountain, well, you might get to the top alone, but it's better if you do it within a team. So I think that we as humiliators cannot do everything for our team. So we have to spot on those champions. A champion, it will be someone who will have an influence within the team, who is understanding all these changes and what they must be done. So if we spot on a champion, that person will help us and will help the team, climb to the top of the mountain. In this case, all the things that we have to do, it is really important to not point out and say, you're going to be the champion. No, we have to understand all the culture, all the background, the context, the strength of that person, to see if there is a champion fit of that person. If it is, talk, mention, and maybe bring out the champion word. And if it's so, all the team will work together to reach that achievement. And I usually let the teams know this specific phrase. We might get to the goal line faster, but if we go together, we get further. That is the case of, balancing all these trade-offs with all these workloads.
Yeah, and I think, with all these workloads that the team faces, there's unofficial workloads and official workloads. And so you do have to be aware that maybe some of the team's frustration is from the unofficial workloads. And again, this gets back to the humane leader needs to understand the company's culture. Some are very, very hierarchical. So in other words, the instructions come down from the very top layer down to the next layer, next layer, next layer. Everything's very formal. Everything's documented. Other cultures, maybe not so much. Maybe sometimes people are getting instructions or bypasses 3 levels of management, and the team's working on something that 2 levels up of management has no idea that the team is spending 25 or 30% of their time on these other tasks. So sometimes just that helping the team manage the workload is, are you aware of all the workload that your team's working on? You may not be, even though you're their direct humane leader. Maybe they haven't told you about 3 layers up, gave them some urgent things to do. Sometimes uncovering that stuff can really help you unburden the team, because you can find out, well, are those really, really the top priorities and you just didn't hear about them? If so, then your top 5 is wrong. Maybe only top 2 of your 5 is correct. And now you need to incorporate these other 3 that are from senior leadership 2 or 3 levels up. Because getting those right and agreed to up and down your organization of the company is critical. So be aware as a humane leader that sometimes you don't know everything that's going on. So ask the question, communicate with your team. Are there other priorities that they're getting that they feel are higher, that maybe for whatever reason they don't feel comfortable telling you because it came from 2 levels up? Still need to be aware.
Yeah.
And then determine, is it appropriate, in the office politics of it, do you have to deprioritize those things that came from up above, or do you need to talk to your leadership to see maybe they are official and we just need to get them on the list and we can move some other things to lower priority? So do be aware that sometimes there are unofficial priorities taking up your team's time that you didn't necessarily give them.
Yeah, understood. Yes, and I love that unburned word, excuse me. Nice. Well, I think with this we should end this episode, Chris. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
We will.